Now, this car is made in England by a German company, but you couldn't sell it in North America. That's because hundreds of the parts on this car would need to be different, and the industry could save billions if regulations were harmonised. Even this key fob works on different frequencies. Well, let's have a word with the Chief Executive of the UK Society of Motor Manufacturers and Traders, Mike Hawes. It really all begins with the front end of the car, doesn't it?
It does. If you look at this vehicle here, this is a car designed for Europe. So look at the front bumper. The bumper is designed to allow for any potential for pedestrian impact. So it's got special pedestrian protection measures in it. If this was the US, it would look very different. Indeed, in many states in the US, there's not even a requirement to have a front number plate there. So I said, look very different.
Is that just because people don't walk around so much in the US?
It is. There's a lot more, lot more congested urban areas in Europe. Then again, if we look at the headlights here, again, these are very different between the US and Europe. If it was the US light you were looking at then, the low beam would be further out and at the very top of the headlamp
cluster. So all completely different parts?
Absolutely. So manufacturers have designed totally different light clusters for Europe versus America.
And it's different inside as well, isn't it?
No, if you look inside the car, there are obviously some other differences as well. I think first and foremost, when you turn the vehicle on, in Europe you'll have symbols, but if this was the US, you would be a requirement to say, physically brake, that the park brake is on.
So that's all different components?
Different components. You look at the horn, we know that in the centre there is the horn. Again, in America it needs to be labelled to say horn. So again, in English, when you're making cars for Europe, given the complexity of languages, that's not required.
And seatbelts?
Seatbelts are quite different. There are still 2 states in America which don't require either the driver or the front passenger to actually wear a seatbelt when driving. So the manufacturers have to ensure that when they're making a car for the States, they've got sensors in the vehicle which detect whether someone is in the seat, whether they're wearing the seatbelt, so you can program the crash protection, things like the airbags, to ensure that they're fully protected.
Now, just suppose these trade talks were agreed. Presumably cars aren't going to change overnight. What would be the process?
First of all, in future regulation, you would design them for the 2 markets in common. For existing regulation, they'd be respected, and so that there'd be a lot of other manufacturers who, especially you look at the UK. The UK has a diversity of small manufacturers who can't access the the American market because the costs of entry, given the separate testing, is too high. This would give a real boost to UK manufacturers, and indeed this proposal for TTIP is recognised on both sides of the Atlantic as being very good for the automotive business.
Well, these trade talks are underway this week. Pretty controversial, quite a lot of opposition here in Europe, so I think the idea of a kind of a world or a transatlantic vehicle, well, for now that is still a bit of a concept car. Nigel Cassidy, BBC News.